Good morning, brothers and sisters. So, so finally, we come to chapter 35 of Book of Isaiah. This is a very important passage. So maybe we can say that chapter 34 and chapter 35 are the very key important conclusions to the first parts of the book of Isaiah. So actually, since the chapter 1 up to here, so the book of Isaiah has been mentioning about some basic issues. So first of all, it tells us that God is the God of the whole earth, and God takes control of all nations. And God is the supreme God. And this is the first issue. And the second issue is, can I rely on this God? Can I rely on this all-powerful God, or can I rely on Egypt or Assyria? So, or should I rely on all nations? So you can see that from the first chapter till now that it's been talking about these two issues. And then later on, we talk. So finally, we talk about all God's judgments upon all nations. It really tells us that God is really the one who takes control of all nations and then history. So in the recent days, we've been talking about that we should rely on God alone, not on Egypt or Assyria. And yesterday we mentioned that God's judgment will be coming upon all the nations. So to Israel, to God's people, to church, the Edom, the people of Edom, were very indifferent to God's people, to church, and they were even putting the oil into the fire. They were even taking the advantage of their sufferings. So we come to chapter 35 today. So behold, our God will be coming. Behold, our God will be coming. So this topic actually derives from verse 4, the last part. He will come with vengeance, with divine retribution. He will come to save you. So this word is spoken to all the Israelites. It is also spoken to all God's people of all generations. Because why? Because our God will surely be coming. He will surely be coming to save us. He will be coming for vengeance for us. Because God will take the revenge for us. And God will avenge for us. And God will also come with divine retribution. What does it mean by retribution? It means the rewards. So it means that in the end days, God will do three things. Not only is He coming, He is coming to rescue, to revenge, and also to retribute. So there will be 4 paragraphs. So in the verse 1, the desert and the parched land will be glad. The wilderness will rejoice and blossom. So while in Chinese versions there are the words certainly. So in English it should be the word will. So there are 21. The words will comes out 21 times. So for the verse 1 and verse 2, that is the first paragraph. The deserts and the parched land will be glad. And even the flowers will burst into bloom. And all areas will be covered with glory and majesty. So it means that when God is coming, even the lands that we thought which was a very parched and very dry would be turned into a land of glory and majesty. So everyone can tell that this is the work of God. It must be done by the work by God. When I used to read these scriptures, I simply got some kind of head knowledge, knowing that yes, God will be coming soon. Yes, even though right now the situation is terrible, but God is coming to change the situation around. But I don't know how He is going to do it. But anyways, since He is God, He can do it. So maybe you can say that, well, it is only the simple faith in God. But today, when I read the scriptures again, I got some enlightenment. For example, speaking of the place I'm living now, in my place there is a balcony. Actually, the balcony is quite big. It's the half size of this platform. So it's a very special place. So we have stayed there for 7 years. So actually, in the first 5 years of these 7 years, we neglected this place. But why? But why do we rent this place? Because the landlord said that we need to rent. So the landlord said that we need to rent this place. But in the first 5 years, the balcony was deserted. We did not really pay any attention to it or fix it. But sometimes when some guests or some brothers and sisters come to my place, I just told them that, we were forced by the landlords to hire this place, to rent this place. So what's to do with this balcony anyway? But in these 2 recent years, something started to change. Because Pastor Deborah suffered from cancer. After the operation, she needs to go for the recovery. So that's why, and sometimes because she didn't want to be confined to her own room all the times. So finally, she just went out to the balcony to walk around and to take the rest there. So actually, on the balcony, there are lots of pot plants. And there are 3 pots of olive trees from Israel. But after 5 years of time, nobody really came over to pick up all these pot plants. Since Pastor Deborah was recuperating from the cancers, she got time to stay at home. She walked around on the balcony, and then she started to water the plants, to fertilize the plants, and she started to get more interested in the gardening. And also, she even bought some few more pot plants and put there in the balcony. And then finally, the whole balcony is changed. It becomes a small garden. Actually, it's like a miracle for us. So today, when I read this passage, so on one hand, we really see that this is the work of God. But on the other hand, I can see the co-work between man and God. So we can see that when life is changed, then the environment will be changed accordingly. So the lesson I've learned is that so actually it is also a warfare when it comes to harvest. Because at the balcony there are rats, there are flies. But we need to preserve our inheritance by destroying all these enemies. So when our hearts are changed, when our lives are changed, then our mentality towards the nature will be changed accordingly. So that's why the balcony is even changed. But when we talk about my balcony again, okay, the harvest at the balcony is not that great because of the attack of the enemies, which are the flies and also the rats. Because why? Because the man just still don't know how to tackle with the enemies. So actually, we need God to do all His work in our lives. Then our lives will only be changed. So when we talk about the deserts, well, which was supposedly to be a parched land, but the desert becomes very glad, and even there are lots of flowers blossoming there. It is not by the work of man, but by the work of God. So first, and also through this, the mentality, the overall mentality of man will be changed accordingly. In this passage, so for the people, for the Israelite people at that time, they may find it quite difficult to understand. Why? Because their nations fell, and they were in exile. So it's quite hard for them to understand this passage. So because they after when the nations fell, afterwards they were even in the exile. How could they understand this passage? After being captured, they were always in the difficult times. How could they understand this passage? But after 2,000 years, when we look back, then we could understand this passage a bit more. Because the words of God must come to pass. And even the environments which are quite impossible to be changed will be changed by the Lord as well. So we are not saying that the people are just blindly waiting and then one day suddenly all the things will be changed. No, it's not like that. We are talking about that men need to stay connected with God constantly, need to build a relationship with God constantly before you will realize your lives will be changed by the Lord. In these 2 days, we have installed the irrigation system. The irrigation system actually is from Israel, and we installed it on our platform, on our balcony. So when we went over to Israel, so we can see that God's work is doing there. But we do believe that God also gave the wisdom to the Israelite to do all the work. And God can turn the situation around, even though which sounds very impossible. So when we speak of the blossom of the flowers and the deserts, people might think that it's impossible, but God can turn the situation around. This is the first point. And then verse 3 to 4. We love one another, and then we will seek God's salvation. So in the whole chapter, we can see God's work. But of course, men can participate in God's work too. Strengthen the feeble hands, steady the knees that give way. So, who are you here talking about? It's talking about us. So, in the context, the people here are referred to those who are in capture, those who are in exile. Yes, it's true that all these people were very miserable. It seems for them that they were hopeless because their nations fell and they were in the exile too. So our nations fell, our nations, our nations were gone, and the Medes Persians destroyed, destroyed, destroyed our nations, and so for all these people, they lost hope in the Lord already, because we are the persons in exile. So when our nations was destroyed, we were just tossed around over 2,000 years. So what can I expect? What can I look forward to? So actually the Bible is a joke to me. But here God once again he says that. God said that strengthen the feeble hands, steady the knees that give way. And say to those with fearful hearts, be strong, do not fear. Your God will come. Because when man thinks, we think of the destruction of the nations. So you will think of your feeble hands, you will think of your staggering knees, and you will think of your fearful hearts. So for us, but here, right now, and God would like to strengthen us a while at the same time. We need to strengthen one another by loving one another. For example, in the cell group, some people must be very zealous, but some people must be lukewarm. But maybe after certain issues, all these lukewarm people becomes very zealous for God. But for those who are very zealous, used to be very zealous, might become lukewarm. So you can see the ups and downs in terms of the spiritual lives. But here we are told that if you are the stronger parties, you should encourage the weaker parties. If your hands are stronger, then you should be helping the one with the feeble hands. We should love one another. We should help one another. We might think that, well, I don't know a lot of things, I know nothing actually. But actually, I realized that, I realized that, if, so I realized something that when we think that the things which are quite simple for us, we can handle them, but finally it turns out that they are too difficult for us to handle. So when people mentions all these things, well, it might not be a big deal for them, but it might be an encouragement to you. So it's the same for our spiritual lives too. Since recently we've been making our balconies, so that's why I make more illustrations about it. For example, we grow the lemons. We are very happy. One day a brother came over to my house. You see, look at the plants. You see, look at the fruits. The fruits are rotten already because of the flies. But I didn't realize. We didn't see them. So he told us that, well, all these fruits were rotten already. So he just took a glimpse and he could find out all these rotten fruits already, but we didn't notice any of them. So that's why the friends helps us, the brothers helps us to cut them away. So we were just like the fools because we were expecting the harvest, but in fact all the fruits were rotten already. And yesterday he also said, "Hey, do you see that there are so many rats?" And then I said, "Are there? Can you see? Can you see all these? And all these things, all these plants have been bitten by the rats." But we didn't know. Because I know nothing about gardening. So within a minute of time, he could identify all the problems on my balcony. So do you see that? Wow, the blessings through the love towards one another is very big. So maybe you just share the thing that you know with the other people. It might be a very big help to the other people already. So we should love one another, help one another. For example, you know food very well. Then maybe you can share about this knowledge with the friends, with the brothers and sisters. For example, you know very well about water, then you tell people about water. So when we do it this way, and we know that God is with us, and God's blessings are there as well. You know, God's presence is with us. Because God would like to help us and bless us through our companions. Then we are strengthened. And then we know that we all the ways we are taken care of by God. Then we know that finally we will receive God's salvation and rescue. Because God has been here with us. So even though the situations looks very terrible, but we have to understand that God all the way has been protecting us. Yes, it's true, there are enemies. Yet it's true, the work of the enemies is very obvious. But at the same time, you need to notice the protection of God all the way. So that's why recently my feelings towards sufferings has been changed. If it was not because of the illness of Pastor Deborah, I believe that our balconies is still in a mess. So can you see the blessing through in the difficult situations? If it is not because I was admitted to the hospital for quite a long time, then all the free curator staff will not become fit. So do you see that you can still see God's blessing in the curses, in the sufferings, in the miserable situations? What are you going to do then now? So we have to let God strengthen our feeble hands, let God steady our staggering knees. And God will turn the impossible situation around. Verse 5. Then will the eyes of the blind be opened, and the ears of the deaf unstopped. Then will the lame leap like a deer, and the mute tongue shout for joy. What is it talking about? It's talking about all the impossible difficulties would be changed around by God. But when Jesus comes, when God comes, or maybe John the Baptist was very weak in faith, and then Jesus Then Jesus said to his disciples that, I'm the one to open the eyes of the blind. I'm the one to open the ears of the deaf. I'm the one to make the lame walk. I want to tell that even though the impossible things for you are very difficult, right? Okay, but in God, all things are possible. Recently, a brother's wife got a stroke, and this is the third time. So actually, it is very tough when it comes to the third time of the stroke. So for these brothers, he was thinking that if God really bring his wife back to the heaven, he's still okay because the wife has been suffering from the strokes many times already. But by the grace of God, the wife is physically okay. So just like the prayer meeting last night, so you remember the testimony yesterday, right? There's a brother who suffered the terminal cancer. So the doctor said that if you went for the treatment, so you might have 2 years of life. But if you didn't take any treatment, then you will have a year of life. So finally, this brother chose just to put a simple faith in the Lord and without any treatment. But amazing things happened and all along the way, and God has been leading this brother, and finally after 5 years of the cancer, he's still surviving, and in fact his health has become much stronger. So you can find the similar things happening to the Israelites and even to us. So all the impossible things will be turned around too. Be it the physical health, the physical sickness. So let's say the blind, the deaf, the lame, the mute. All of them will be healed by the Lord. Or maybe even the burning sand, they will become a pool. And the thirst ground will have the springs of water. And it is actually talking about that God will open the way out in the desert. And the desert will become the fertile land, and which will become the forest. So people might think that this disease is critical, is fatal and incurable. So it is beyond healing. So maybe you think that look at this desert, it is beyond cured. But when God comes, everything can be cured, and everything can be changed by the Lord. When we follow God, then we need to understand that God will help us, and there will be miracles. There will be a lot of signs and wonders all along the way when we follow Him. And actually, all across the land, all across the globe, and even in our church, a lot of brothers and sisters have been experiencing all these kind of miracles in the Lord. Just like yesterday, the brother shared about his testimony that he was suffering from the critical cancer, but amazingly, and God healed him, turned his sickness around, and healed him. But I tell you, all these testimonies are found in our community. So we need to put our faith in the Lord. And finally, so the way of holiness, the way of the redeemed will be open for you. In verse 8, and a highway will be there. It will be called the way of holiness. The unclean will not journey on it, and it will be for those who walk in that way. In other words, there's a way that God prepared for the redeemed, for the ransomed. So because our God has paid the ransom for us to save us. So we are God's ransomed people because Jesus has redeemed us with His precious blood. So we are surely be saved by the Lord. And besides, when we travel on this way of holiness, there will not be any lions or ferocious beasts. So definitely we could return to God's place. So actually we will be re-enter Zion with singing, with everlasting joys, with gladness. So that's why when we come to this passage, what it is said is that don't ever lose our hope in the Lord because God is here with us. And God will turn all the impossible things around. And at the same time, we need to encourage one another. We need to support one another. And God will use us to turn around the situation. Because, God's will is for us to manage the land. And then God would like us to return to Him. Then God will be very happy to see us very joyful and very glad in His place. So, for example, when we talk about our children or whether they are very good at the studies or not, it's not a big problem. Given that they are strong and healthy, given that the relationship between the parents and the children is good, it is wonderful already. So, in the same way, today we need to encourage one another. We need to help one another. When you are having any difficulties, we pray to God. So we wait upon Him. And then we wait upon Him. We seek Him. So in God's community, then we will find a lot of life testimonies, including our life's testimonies. Shall we worship God together?